Welcome to the other side of the ball. Dub is just on mute for a half second. He's joining us right now. I'm Corey Hammond alongside Anthony Double A Alvarez, Dub for short.
Yeah,
Dub for the win.
I do have many names. That's ridiculous. But yes, welcome. As you can see, it's just me and Corey today, as Mr. Vera is on assignment. But hopefully, he shall join us next week. We apologize for the delay of getting on the air. It's been a busy morning, afternoon for your boy. I didn't have phone because it was getting some maintenance done. So hence the delayed start. But thank you for guys' cooperation and your patience. But here we are, episode 157. We basically I talked about, you know what are we to discuss? Eventually we will get to the finalists for the awards of this year, and of course the news that
Eventually, we already did it. You
well
guys are
the
just behind, listeners.
oh, well we do know is as is being shown on the A7FL main pages. Mark your calendars. March 15th, 2026, season 12. We throw it off yet again. Um, and by God, I'm excited. We just talked about that Atlanta has now officially thrown their hat into the world of A7FL, and they will be starting this March, as along with the rest of us, as we will now see to see if the Trenton BIC can do the one thing they have not done in their glorious A7FL history. The only thing left for them to do is to go back to back. Can that happen? Can the Insomniacs make it 3-4 and give us a modern day A7FL dynasty? That remains to be seen. What will happen in the Midwest? Will we get more teams? Will the DMV get more teams? Will more expansion continue? You'll have to find out on March 15th, 2026, which is not too far from now, considering that we are, Corey Hammond, we are halfway, well, more than halfway through October. It'll be literally November in 2 weeks.
Well, and for this off-season show, the other side of the ball off-season, we already covered the season awards in episodes, and we just recently finished and did a recap of four of the seven positions or eight positions that we recapped in a last week's show. We did quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and I believe defensive linemen. That left us returners, um,
Offensive lineman.
offensive linemen, and corners. So what Dub and I started doing earlier in the week slash today is compiling the list for the top 50, which is a show to expect in the near future as we count down the top 50 players of the 2025 season in the ASMFL.
To which last
That will definitely be an interesting list.
to which last
Um,
one was Danya Lyons, and where will he be on the list this year? You just have to watch and find out.
well, and because of his availability, his overall, time on the field, he will have a precipitous drop. His importance is still up there, but even in his own position on his own team, he was not the number one guy. So it'll be interesting to see how our returning number one gets voted in. But since we don't have Mr. Vera here, who is a very important kind of counterweight to what can be a biased take from me and a non-committal take from you, Dub. Not to throw you under the bus, but as a play-by-play guy, I know that you try to kind of stay out of the you know hard and fast opinion stuff, and you try to stay more objective than subjective by giving us
Correct.
facts and information as opposed to shitty hot takes like I do. But missing Chris, I think it would be interesting if we kind of did a freestyle show. Maybe only capped it at about an hour and really tried to focus, in my opinion, on getting some talking points for our fans that are, look, they're subscribed. There's over 1,000 subs to the other side of the ball, but we've been really missing you guys as listeners. We're only in the 20s range, and normally this show can get up to 350 during the season. So what I want to do is throw it to you, Dub, and give you a freestyle topic just to kind of, we'll survive today and get to next week with Chris again, and we'll have a more organized, you know, tighten up the belt type of show. But let's have a little bit of freestyle fun. Let's just go off the top of the dome, and I'm gonna just put you on the spot. And what's one topic that we haven't really discussed this off season that you thought is you still think then because you're about to say it that was a top storyline that we haven't covered coming out of last season.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it at verbatim, but I mean, mainly, um, I, for lack of thereof, I mean, has the 3-on-1 return become a lost art? Because I mean, you normally would get a plethora of 3-on-1 return touchdowns during the season, and Lord knows the last two we've had a plethora of them. But it just seems like now, I don't want to say that teams might have found a way to defend it, but the defense has gone a lot better, and you're not seeing a lot of these commonality touchdowns as of what I mean. For example, a couple of years ago with Savion Cunningham, he was half of OTT scoring via of the 3-on-1 return. And this past season, you hardly heard his name in the return game, which, I mean, no discredit to him, which means, again, defenders have gotten better. But, Corey, do you think what we deemed as the most exciting play in sports, do you think it has, I don't want to say fallen off the wayside, but have teams figured out, for lack of a better term, have neutralized the 3-on-1 return?
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, Dub, because there's two factors. And we'll start with the 2024 championship, in which the Insomniacs, with 17 seconds left and down, right? They snatched a victory and a championship out of the jaws of defeat by perfecting and clutching up in that final 3-on-1 that Danye did. And what I'll say is this is that not only the BIC specifically, because I think you could see that it was definitely a point of contention and concern for that team headed into the offseason and what they needed to do better because they basically had the championship in their grasp. They just needed one player to bring one guy down in those final moments. Now, look, you ask Scooter and Davik and Munchie if they got the ball back, would they have scored? Hypothetically, maybe, but it is what it is. The play that decided it was that gave them the go ahead score was a 3-on-1 return. So in a lot of ways, the overcorrection, like I said, in 2024 to the Insomniacs winning for the first time, and then all of these teams started forming super teams. There's also, in my opinion, in the 2025 season, a little bit more of that overcorrection in the 3-on-1 coverage teams, specifically for you, Dub, watching the games out in Vegas, which is still a relatively young division, and those teams, those coaches, those rosters are still getting used to a play that is still unique in its own right. But I'll say this is that just look at the personnel from the top teams, especially, but even some of the middle and bottom teams, instead of putting the guy that doesn't get in a lot or a backup corner and a fourth string wide receiver and a guy that's your most athletic long thrower of the ball, teams prioritize that position by putting their best tacklers, their best open field players at 3-on-1 coverage guys because of how devastating those returns can be when they go for touchdowns. One of the reasons, Dub, it becomes such a gut punch is that 3-on-1 return almost always happens at either the start of a half or a game, which is even worse potentially, is an untimed down. And when it goes for a touchdown, Dub, those plays are devastating because with no time off the clock, 7 or 8, or if you miss both extra point attempts, right, the only 6, but all of the points that the previous team's drive put on the board can be instantly erased with no time off the clock and just one player making a fantastic play. That's what makes that return play devastating. I think what teams are starting to do is prioritize the coverage of those kicks, and that's why there was a precipitous drop in total amount of touchdowns from last year to this year. And then the championship game is the point B, where it was front and center how important and game changing those plays could be, because you give the Insomniacs the one opportunity with Daniel Lyons, he takes it to the crib. Then you take the opportunities completely away. You throw the ball out of the back of the end zone on the shorter field, and you basically get, and to no fault of their own, because I think that there is a legitimate, there is a legitimate argument to be made. But basically, you gave the Insomniacs an excuse, a potentially valid excuse, and why the game turned out the way that it did in the championship. So that play, although I don't think the returners got worse, Dub, I do think that there was less touchdowns because not only did the personnel improve by putting in the better player, but the form and the scheme and the way in which guys attacked the returner on the coverage team improved dramatically year over year. And I think that's kind of the long-winded explanation of what happened on those 3-on-1s. And it'll be interesting to see if there's another adjustment that teams make, because it can be a game-changing type of play if you can put a player back there that figures out a way to turn that into points. And I think there's guys deep on rosters that haven't gotten opportunities yet that if they do, they'll surprise. But there's also going to be new rookies that maybe people aren't aware of or figure it out yet that could kind of add a new spark to it next year. Because I do think that this year was the overcorrection of the 3-on-1 return teams, and specifically because the championship game in 2024 ended the way that it did in such dramatic fashion on play exactly like that, though.
Well, a very well explanation and a very, very well great take on that. I mean, obviously, there's always new guys that will come in and add that to the repertoire. All key players at key positions come in. I mean, for instance, how many times we saw Dwayne Coswell on the throw off on the final return, as opposed to it normally would just be the same three people. I mean, it was always Matt Cannon, Stone Stevenson, and whoever the throw off person was in coverage. And then once Pac Money took it back for the BIC in 2024, in comes Denzel Daniels, and in a sense, he becomes the massive help in helping defend the run one for the against the BIC. And obviously, I mean, when you have an arm like Mark Bagway, I mean, why would you not neutralize that after Danye takes the 3-on-1 after the BIC just scored, and boom, just like that, you're back up 8 points again, which, of course, the Insomniacs for most of the first half in this past championship game led until Matt Riddick said, "Hold my beer," and started to pick up some passes from Scooter, and thus turned the tide dramatically, and thus the BIC ended up winning by 14 by capitalizing off those 3 interceptions. So, I mean, obviously, a new season upcoming. Obviously, things drastically change. I mean, we talked about how in 2023 it was run heavy, run heavy, run heavy. Same with 24, and then this year it became an aerial assault where it was passing records galore. I mean, we saw Scooter throw 8 touchdowns in a game. Of course, what Kason Campbell did, shattering receiving records galore. Sterry going through a whole season not throwing interceptions since last year's championship game in 24, and then comes back and just takes care of the football. So, I mean, what kind of dynamic do you think 2026 will bring? And I know we're forecasting way ahead to next season, which again begins on March 15th, 2026. And please tune into A7FL.tv to check the games in your area. Looking forward to getting back on the air. And I know Corey is looking forward to getting back on the air and playing Or are you playing in 26, Corey? Let me just get that out of the way. Are you playing in 26?
Well, I'm not. First of all, I'm not breaking any news just yet. Either way, but until you hear directly from me, otherwise, I am an active quarterback in the A7FL. As far as I know, the Hawks are looking to kind of build on a pretty good return to the A7FL from last season. The Hawks had I think 2 or 3 seasons off. Come back, we were able to get a couple of the players that we got up on that roster collectively. Now, obviously, I do have voting power, so maybe, call me biased if you want. I didn't vote myself, by the way, fans. But anyway, we did get, I believe, 3 of our players into the top 50. I think you guys actually it was 4. 4 of our players made the top 50. So there's definitely some building blocks to work to build with that team. And I'll be excited to see how the team looks as we get closer. But I think to answer your question, what do you expect from next year is kind of the way that you kind of put it out there.
Yeah. I mean, like I said,
Listen, I think.
I know we're forecasting mighty ahead.
Well, no, I mean, listen, there's a lot of things that we could look to. I think the first thing that I'll forecast is I think that we're going to see an Insomniacs team that once again has a reason to play beyond their just kind of baseball card. Like a lot of teams know that if they play to their hypothetical potential, that they're just better, right? I mean, that was the slogan from that team led by Munchie, is that my friends are just better. And when you have that as the status quo, there becomes, in my opinion, the greatest threat to your success as an organization or a company or a team, with that complacency of just being better, is that when you do finally get punched in the mouth, or you do finally face a team that is at least comparable, it's hard to turn it back on to 100%, or to quote an anime that's in its final season. Shout outs to Crunchyroll. To go beyond plus ultra, some might say, right? And that's shouting out My Hero Academia, which is a shonen anime. But the point is that when a great competitor faces a challenge, and they face a challenge week in, week out, they can summon that extra to overcome whatever the adversity is. And the thing that I saw from the Insomniacs last year is that unfortunately they were too good for their own good, week in, week out. I ask you this, Dub, because you watched them closely. Before the championship game, what was their closest test? Exactly, right? let's just be honest with ourselves. Stick with it. In division, it was a blowout, right? Am I wrong?
No. It was a pretty much one sided game compared to the classic they gave us the last 2 seasons in 23 and 24 with the 42-39 game in 23 and, of course, the 56-50 game in 2024. But, I mean, this year, I mean, it was just – I mean,
It was a blowout. And to be fair,
that was one of the few times Stone King looked lost in the huddle, was that particular game right there.
well, I mean, listen, a lot of quarterbacks are going into an Insomniacs game and struggling. So this is no shade against Canyon Stone King,
Not
but
at all.
also that's a stick with a team that had not played that level of competition in this league, in this specific sport ever. And obviously there's guys like Darren Palmer and Betts and Mora and all these guys. Josiah Sow. I don't know if he was there yet, but he definitely knows how to lead this team. Um, but
But I will say,
regular
even
season. Yeah, go ahead.
but I'll say this. But I think in the case of Stone King, I think him getting Innocence beat down the way he did, I think that helped him have the tremendous game that he had, albeit in defeat against the eventual champions, because, like I said, he looked calm in the pocket, looked poised, and looked like he felt like he belongs and he could play because, again, they they took it to the limit against the eventual champions. And unfortunately for Sigler, they just could not get that key stop on third downs, which seems to be always the slogan I tend to keep saying with the BIC. But I mean, like if you want to beat the man, you have got to learn to get up on third downs, because if you can't get off on third down and you're trying to maintain pace, you can't, because when you need that one legitimate stop to try to get your offense the ball back that's cooking and you can't get off, that deflates you.
Well, and to be fair to Scott Hamilton, who the week following Canyon Stone King's breakout performance against BIC's defense, all of a sudden, Scott Hamilton struggles and throws 3 picks. Yeah, it wasn't the same personnel. Let's just be clear. A, B, the weather was certainly a factor, but I don't want to take anything away from anybody. But what I do want to say is that when we break down the 2025 season for the Insomniacs, I think their biggest detriment to the season was the lack of talent in front of them, to no fault of their own. It's not their fault that the Vegas division, in my opinion, took, like, maybe 2 or 3 steps back by losing a team that was a contender and having to replace a bunch of leaders on the other contender. The Insomniacs suffered because week in, week out, they were playing inferior opponents, so much so that I think that they were not prepared to be able to, turn on and function on all cylinders when it mattered against a team that actually matched them talent for talent in most of the positions. And then, you look at them coming into this year, I think that they have all of the motivation that they're going to need. And I do think that there is going to be a natural progression of their competition. And we may even see that confidence built from that loss in Sikwit's game improve Canyon Stone King to be a guy that understands how to work that pocket, how to play in a 7-on-7 full tackle as opposed to 11-on-11. Change the angles, change the timing, get the ball out more effectively and quickly. There's no worry about the guy who's 6'7" getting his pass swatted at the line. If he can get on that, more or less the Tom Brady 1-2 release the ball timing, and can find his receivers, who were two of the best in the league last year, in Darren Palmer and Siobhan Richardson. I think that kind of corrects itself for the Insomniacs. But more than anything, having that loss be something that they have to live with for a full off season, while those guys want and have the motivation to get that get back. I'll say this for Derek Duncan in the Vegas division: the best thing that could have happened to Derek, the division, and the Insomniacs specifically as an organization moving forward into the future of the A7FL was them losing that game. Because I think if they win that game, they walk away from the league, they get bored, guys retire, guys go into the ether with 3 times champs and say, we own this league, no one can touch us. Now they have the motivation, come back and give us a season to watch. And really, it's going to, fuel the fire that it's going to take for them to get back to where I think they expect to be, and where I expect them to be in 2026. And I think to kind of logically come to the conclusion of that conversation, Dub, where I lost Dub, so I'm just talking to myself and the fans. So send in your comments, although I don't see any. BIC, I've mentioned this before, but they, in my opinion, were worse on paper this year than they were last year. And yeah, they won this year and they lost last year, but they had a healthier, deeper, better executing team at a lot of other positions. But with the play of Sarah Codrington basically playing a perfect sheet, no interceptions, no turnovers, and really playing that passing offense to perfection. There was really only one game, the second game against the Renegades, in which he looked like he struggled at all. And when he was struggling, he still had, that ability to make the plays happen on the ground. But when you look at BIC's season, they faced a lot more games in which it was at least relatively close. They played the Watchmen. It was a tougher game than the Insomniacs faced all season. They had two overtime games against the Renegades. And that game against Stick With It, although it was a weird situation with a lower, not a full roster and 190 degrees outside, still a close game in which they had to find something within them, late in that fourth quarter to come out with a win there and even secure a spot in the championship against a tough Stick With It team. Credit the Animals for having a good season, but with David Tender on one wheel, a not a full roster, the Insomniacs in the Final Four faced a far more inferior opponent than BIC did. And the challenge that BIC faced week after week, in my opinion, I think better prepared them so that when they were required to play their best in the most important situation in the championship, they were the ones that were able to find a way. It didn't help. Or I mean, excuse me, it didn't hurt that Matt Riddick was playing out of his mind on defense, reading Scooter Hamilton's passes and converting those into interceptions and lost offensive opportunities for the defending champs at the time. So Dub just texted me. He is having technical difficulties. He will join us back in a second. So we're riding solo here on the other side of the ball. This is Corey Hammond. As you probably well know, I'm the one who talks probably the most in the A7FL media verse. So my apologies. But we're just having a show where we're talking about the topics that we have yet to cover. And Dub went
Can
with
anybody hear me?
I can hear you. Dub started by going with the kind of
Can
loss
anybody
of
hear me?
importance. I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Can anybody hear me? Anybody at all?
Yes. All right. Well, Dub is
Well,
having some issues here.
I can't hear myself,
I
and
can
I
hear
can't
you.
hear nobody.
All right. Well, things happen. This happens. I can hear your blinker even. Dub, look at the picture of the
Okay.
beautiful kid. You'll see me speaking. Dub, you
I
got
still
me?
can't hear anybody.
Anyway, all right. So I'll fight Dub saying that he can't hear anybody. But Dub went over the 3-on-1. I was
Why
able
is it
to.
always like this?
I don't know, Dub. If you're asking me,
Okay, now
it's
there
you.
we go. There we go.
There we go.
Okay,
All right.
now
So
there.
I
All
was
right.
just about to talk trash on you because you couldn't hear me. So I'm glad you were able to catch me before I got too out of line. Dub, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Loud and clear.
So your first topic was the 3-on-1. We covered it. My topic was the shame that was the Insomniacs season and lead up to the championship, which I think they were untested. They were left board. They were too good. I felt that their roster with the inclusion of William Carswell and Shannon Allen and Moses Smith, I felt like their roster improved year over year, and BIC's team and roster got worse. And it was just interesting that the individual players and the individual play from Sterry
That's
Codrington and
interesting.
Kason Campbell.
Why?
What's up?
I'm curious to hear this take.
Well, you look at BIC all
And now
season.
I can't hear Corey again.
Can you
Okay.
hear me? Well, you look at
Yeah, I
BIC
think
all
I'm.
season. They did not have the same offensive line that they had in 2024, which featured Dave Valley, but also had
Correct.
Big Dippy. And when they went with Markai or some of the other guys, it was still two dominant offensive linemen of the three. And no shade and no disrespect, but Kwak is a very sneaky and formidable blocker in his own right. So what it comes down to for me is that BIC's roster, cornerback for BIC, consistently they were putting Sterry Codrington, Ashante Worthy, and Kason Campbell out there. So we're going from a team that had Amir Chick Morris, H3 Frazier, Trey Cohen, You know, Sire Hancock, and in 2024, those guys were balling out.
Correct.
They were among the best corners in the league. They gave even Scooter in the championship in 2024 a hard time.
Yes.
Some could argue even maybe a harder time than in 2025. I mean, there's obviously the three picks, but when you look at Scooter's performance, I mean, the touchdown passes and yardage on a shorter field was incredibly better than it
It was.
was the previous year.
I mean, obviously, and I mean, it was said multiple times by you that both Sterry and Scott were they struggled in 24 without question. Both seemed off. They were inaccurate, which is highly unlike both of those guys because we both know how incredibly accurate they are and can throw the ball and hit their spots anywhere they please. It's just that, I mean, obviously, you think about it in an arena. Obviously, they were putting up arena football type numbers, which feel in comparison to what they did on the field in 24. But I mean, it was said one of the weak links of the BIC, if there was one, was the secondary. And yes, even though Matt Riddick came up with three timely interceptions off the throwing arm of Scott Hamilton, um, Davik Clark still cooked and feasted on the BIC secondary to the tune of three touchdown receptions.
Wasn't it four?
Along, I think it might have been three or four, but for
One or
sure
the
it was
other.
three. For sure it was three.
It was the
Possibly could
fade,
have been
yeah, fade and two, fade and two
quick
route
screens.
returns. Yeah, yeah, yep.
So I mean, he still cooked and feasted. But again, as I've always said, if you're -3 in the turnover margin, a lot of times you don't win games, and a lot
What's
of
up, Miz?
teams
I'll
can't.
show you my face.
And a lot of teams can't cover that.
Yeah, and
Well,
so for me, Dub, when you look at the corners and not the roster because it was the same guys, but the play, those guys didn't play as well for BIC. And then you look at even the offensive playmakers for BIC. They truncated their offense. They had less offensive lineman depth. They didn't have as talented an offensive line. But what they did is they got play from their quarterback that neutralized all of it. And Sterry Codrington was the number two rusher in the league and was, I think, close to 1,000 yards more than the top passers in the league. Now, he had a registered 10 games where some of the other guys had seven, but, I digress. So, I mean, that would be, yeah, what's up, Miz? You're laughing. Yeah, I'm in a hallway. I'm running around. There's kids sleeping. I'm trying to help my wife and not be a deadbeat. So I apologize. I can't be on screen. Look at the face. This face is better to look at anyway. Yeah, people are sick of my face.
well, I'm just driving to work, so that's why you see Kevin Pillar diving for a fly ball in the outfield.
Well, I liked Kevin Millar better when he was on the Idiots with Boston. But anyway, uh, listen, I think that it's not insane to argue that roster-wise, Insomniacs were better, BIC was worse, but the competition that the Insomniacs played and the preparation that the BIC schedule kind of put them through was one of the deciding factors. Not the only, but one of the deciding factors in the championship game. Health was obviously another, and the depth that BIC was able to find in New Jersey, across the street from Six Flags, right? Um,
Right.
but let's be fair, some of that depth was coming from Florida and
Yes.
central Pennsylvania. So it was still quite a bit of distance these guys had to cover, and we're glad to have
Now,
them in the league.
now you mentioned the scheduling, and let me throw this on you, Corey, with this question: do you think those two games against the East Orange Renegades, where they both were down to the wire and literally came down, one game came down to literally one play, and the other game was BIC held on late. Do you think those two games against the Renegades certainly helped the BIC overcome the storm early on in the first half against the Insomniacs in the title game?
Well, I think it was definitely preparation because the way that the East Orange Renegades were built in my opinion, is specifically to compete with BIC. The Renegades featured huge size on the offensive and defensive lines. That's the biggest offensive line. That's the biggest defensive line I think we've ever seen in the A7FL. And we could go back and we could kind of look at the tape, and there's teams, and if I had a guy that's from Town Beef, he would tell me about how SWG was this and the Bombers were that and the Chiefs, blah blah blah, and all that. And those days of A7FL were more run heavy. You needed bigger offensive linemen. You needed defensive tackle types. So with the spreading out of the offenses, almost to mirror like how NBA basketball has gone from the '90s in the paint, feature the center type of offense to now it's more European, everything's spread around and outside. I think the A7FL has gone through a similar shift, and what that means is that you're sorry, my wife's in the background. She's doing, but that shifts the personnel that you put on your roster. And what the Renegades did is they're like, all right, well, BIC's offensive line is a little smaller this year. Their defensive line a little smaller this year. We're gonna go big ass offensive line, big ass defensive line, and we're gonna bring in a quarterback and serve that when you give him time is one of the better throwers of the football. Add Kyle Ward and my guy Michael Richardson Jr., which I think was overlooked, but definitely a big time playmaker for the Renegades this season. Also, shout outs to Jimmy Flott, my guy. The Renegades were built to compete against BIC. Now, I think that formula that the Renegades put together was an interesting preparation because big offensive line. What other team sounds like that in the A7FL, Dub?
Hmm.
Big offensive
Okay.
line.
Say that again one more time.
Big
Oh yes.
offensive line. What other team other than the East Orange Renegades has a big offensive line that's really talented?
Oh, that would be the Insomniacs.
I would say so. And what team has a quarterback that can dot up a secondary with wide receivers that are ballers out there that are really tough to play against?
Well, that would also be a team that is a pack of wolves that plays in Las
Yes,
Vegas.
exactly. Now, is there any preparation for RTC? No. But BIC playing the Renegades is a pretty good scrimmage or test to make sure you're prepared to play against what the Insomniacs do best. And although BIC still showed their vulnerability at times against the Insomniacs, I think those two tests against the Renegades were great preparation. In fact, necessary preparation, likely, for BIC to find a way to win in the championship game against the Insomniacs. So, you know, listen, I don't know if you take the Insomniacs, I mean, excuse me, if you take the Renegades and you put them through a different path, that they would have been, the eventual champs because of how closely they played BIC. You saw the Renegades, they played the Watchmen, wasn't as good of a matchup as their two games against BIC. The Animals, Renegades would have been an amazing game to watch. I think those teams are on a similar arc, but we never got that last year. It would have been interesting. And if the Insomniacs play Renegades, I don't know how that goes. The Renegades really struggle in the back end at the corner position. So, you tell me how that probably would have went. And then also, same thing with Sickwit. It'd be interesting to see how Canyon Stone King could deal with Damon Smalls, Dondre Haynes, and the other guy, number 12. I'm forgetting his name, but they called him Dog. Guys all above 6'5", all monsters, and all really have no respect for the health of the opposing quarterback. But it's not about the Renegades because they lost both times. It really was about BIC finding a way to win those games, albeit in drops. They'll take it. And for that team to come back in and have the motivation from losing the championship and kind of recentering and refocusing around their core, because it's not like they went out and got more guys, right? BSC didn't come back with a deeper roster other than some of the depth that they added at different positions, which was important. But it was Kason Campbell, it was Ashante Worthy, it was Sterry Codrington, it was K-Wack, it was Big Mo, Isaac Negron. It was the same kind of, the familiar faces from the BIC team that was a runner-up, just playing with more conviction and with that added motivation of revenge and wanting to get it back.
Conviction, yeah,
And I
conviction and desire.
and I think moving into the 2026 season, guess what team has those things now going for them that they didn't, basically cruising and winning every game that they played except for that one really close game to stick with it, which my argument would be, yes, I called it. And yes, it was. Sorry,
I mean,
I was requested inside. I was requested for something unrelated to the show. So I
okay.
apologize, guys. I apologize.
No, no. I mean,
But not to be
when life,
derailed, not to be derailed.
when the,
Long story short, Insomniacs are coming back hungry next year, and there's nothing scarier than a starving wolf pack. And I think that's what,
that
unfortunately, the Vegas division is going to have to face next year.
well, I mean, again, we have seen it before. When you have something and it's been taken away, I mean, like I said, they had aspirations. They really wanted to three-peat, which has not happened in the A7FL. And the fact that they felt like, I mean, to a man, they told you that, on that day, BIC was better, and they certainly were. They won 14 points. Um, they definitely will take that with them. I mean, it's not that they needed extra motivation, but the fact is, they felt like they lost the trophy. It's like they won it back. And it's also the same way that the BIC felt because, I mean, up until this past season, they were the last team from the Northeast to hold the championship. Um,
They
and
won
then
that. They had that game won if they tackle Danye Lyons in
Kanye, yeah,
their own opinion, right? Because the game wouldn't have been over at that point. There would still be
it
time on the
was not.
clock, opportunity, yada yada. The game was pretty much a BIC game controlled situation for most of the four quarters of that game. The game really only turned into a championship Insomniacs game after that Danye return, right? So, and Insomniacs won. That's not what I'm saying. They proved to be the better team because they found a way to win even when it wasn't their best day. However, I think, and this is kind of revisionist history, and it's kind of old man Corey Hammond get off my lawn stuff. But I will say this: the attitude in which the Insomniacs entered the 2024 championship was with a chip on their shoulder and with everything to prove to a team that they respected, but wanted more than anything to beat. You've seen the clip, Stub. There was a copious amount of disrespect being shared by the leaders of the Insomniacs pre-game, in the coin toss. I mean, these guys didn't even want to shake hands with the team that they had bested the year before. And I don't think that they came into that championship game in 2025 with a chip on their shoulder, respect, and hunger. I think they came in with a little bit of overconfidence, with that, hey, our guys are just better. All we have to do is just show up, and our guys are going to figure out how to beat this team. And when the score got to like a even wider margin, I think than the year before that they came back, and on fourth down, Scooter throws it to Munch, and it's incomplete. All of a sudden, that entire team had a paradigm shift of like, oh shit, what happened to us just rolling out here and just winning because we're better? And that attitude is for sure not what the Insomniacs are going to face any game in next year, because there's nothing worse than somebody that's already got the talent to beat you, that also has that perceived slight. It's one of the reasons why everybody loves the Michael Jordan documentary. What's it called? The
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance. Yeah, yeah. I kept thinking, winning time, but that's about the Pacers just winning a regular season game. Um, it's, yeah, I was like, it's not winning time because that's only about Reggie Miller winning a regular season against the goddamn Knicks. But anyway, that just shows where my basketball mind's at. But what made Michael Jordan great was a lot of things. But one of those things is that whenever he had that extra motivation, that perceived flight, it helped him have the attitude that he just wanted to dominate the other guys and find that deep thing within him that all great competitors have to become a champion even in spite of a potentially mediocre performance. Insomniacs came into that game with a lot of disrespect, a lot of overconfidence, a lot of like, we're here, you guys should just go home. I don't think it served them well, in my opinion.
Now, let me flip it and ask you this question. So, now that the Trenton BIC have become once again the hunted, if you're Ken Stansbury, how do you get your guys to not fall into that place of complacency? And like I said, the one thing they have not done, and the BIC have done a lot of great things in this league, but the one thing they have not done is gone back to back.
Yeah, I
So
mean
if
that's
you're Ken
that's the
Stansbury,
thing, right, Doug? That's
yeah,
that's what I think is the big question because the one thing that BIC has not yet done is been able to survive the gauntlet of teams when they're the team to beat and they know they're the team to beat to make it all the way through. Now they have won championships before and come back and still been a really good team. But complacency does kick in. And this is what I'll say, the first championship in which BIC won in 2016, it was a lot of things going for them. And it had been a long time that they had been one of, if not the team to beat, and just hadn't yet figured it out. There was a lot of almosts for BIC leading up to 2016. And really what brought them over the hump was exceptional play in the second half of that championship game from CP3, their quarterback, and Courage, their running back, pretty much going to one specific scheme in which it was CP3 breaks the pocket, extends the play, finds Courage leaking out late, and that being the one play that the Chiefs had no way to stop. Um, Now, that team added a quarterback in the offseason, and there's a long story to it, but that quarterback was me. And in their defending championship year, I was not the starter. CP3 was to start the season. Um, I had originally started the season with Savage, and then things went a certain way. Blah blah blah. There's a long story there. I don't want to bore anybody too specifically. But what I will say is that the team in 2017, the returning champs, did not have six of the 14 starters return from offensive line, defensive line, secondary. Those to me are really important positions. So they came back not only just complacent after just winning, but a completely different team because of the amount of effort it took that core to finally break free. Finally break through. And then there was a rebuilding year in their defending championship year in which we did make it to the final four, but lost to the Immortals, I believe, in Pennsylvania. It was 50-41, um, and that sucked. But I mean, look, that defense the year before held the Chiefs in the second half to 0 points, and against the Immortals in the playoffs, we let up 50. So I mean, obviously there was a little bit of a difference there. And then after they won in 22, they failed to even beat the U Dub in their return year without Huff, which if you think about that is insane. And it's I think there is a victory defeated you Batman thing. And one thing that this core though has learned is that you can't just roll out there, assume you're the champions, and win. In 2024, BIC should have beat the Insomniacs. They didn't. And the reason they didn't is because they didn't finish. And the reason they didn't finish, I don't know. Say what you want, but on the most important play of their season, they needed one of three guys to make a tackle, and none of them figured it out. So, listen, I don't know why you say that or what happened, but at the end of the day, that's what football comes down to sometimes. And having that extra motivation like they did this year, having the extra motivation like the Insomniacs did, it helps in those situations turn what could be the thing that the one thing that changes the tiny little detail that changes the outcome of a close game. Having that extra motivation can be that one last piece of grain that topples over, the balance and shifts to your side. So, listen, I think a huge question going into next year is not only can BIC kind of maintain that level of dominance that it seemed like they had this year over the Northeast. It's Is it now the turn for one of those secondary teams in the Northeast to take that final leap? Could it be the Renegades who were that close? Could it be the Animals that have improved year over year the past couple? I don't know. I think the question remains in who plays for these teams once we get to March. And I think this offseason, especially as we get closer to the season, might be electric because the one thing that we really haven't talked about all offseason so far is what the hell is going to happen with the Patterson U. And if you want to just for the last 8 minutes of us getting to an hour, kind of maybe explore the hypothetical situation of, you know, who is going to be the second best or at least preseason number two in the East. Because every time somebody tries to count out the Patterson U, they come back with a vengeance.
They do,
and
but of
and
course,
will the other divisions pony up and figure out a way to improve? For instance, can Ohio get back to form? Because I think we saw a lot of great things from Ohio 2 years ago. And for them to come back last season with only two teams,
two
really
teams,
only
yeah,
one team in Ohio, one team in Indiana, for them to only come
yeah,
back two teams, they got to
yeah,
figure something out there.
yeah.
And
Because I mean, one of the things I really wanted to see was, I mean, I know they lost the game, but the Covington Heights had a very good showing against the U, and I've always said this, and I'll stay on that hill. If some passes went their way, who knows what kind of game it could have been? Because I mean, I still say the Heights left some plays, left some points in that game, but I was anxious to see how they could take that next step before we all just found out pretty much at the same time that it was going to be two teams,
yeah,
the Crush and the Octane, coming out of that regional area.
and
Which
what
again,
you could have made the argument, Dub, that them reducing the amount of teams and enhancing maybe like bulking up the talent on the main team, right? You could make that argument that they were trying to give themselves a better overall shot. I think what happened is the opposite. I think that they lost the overall amount of guys, and because of the travel, because of the less games, in the local area, what you had was you had a depreciation of the division and then the top team, because that QC Crush team is not as good as 2 years ago. Sin City Chaos team. There's just no way you can make that argument.
no,
I
no,
actually thought that the Chaos, based on what I had seen from them that season, could maybe have beaten the Watchmen in that game. Now, obviously, neither of
we'll
those
never know.
teams neither of those teams were well behaved enough for us to actually get what we wanted, and we got
Yeah,
something that we didn't want. But
true.
that's interesting. But the other thing is who is the spiritual successor to the Force? Because to me, the Vegas division, if it doesn't have three pretty good teams like upper tier teams, then Sickwood is gonna Sickwood is gonna potentially fail because yeah they'll blow out the other two teams, but then they have no warm up game so that they have more competition that'll gear them up to playing a team like the Insomniacs or teams from the Northeast. If there is a number three team that is actually a legitimate type of team in the Vegas division, I think the Sickwood team and the Insomniacs team, they benefit greatly from having that really good third team. No disrespect to the Stealth, but I'll put it this way: Dub, did the Stealth beat the Animals?
Could they? I
No.
don't know
Do
if
they?
they keep no
Not
no no. Do they?
hypothetically. Do they?
No, because there's inconsistency at quarterback for the Stealth.
No, they're not going to beat. They're not going to beat the Animals. Or and these are both teams fully staffed. Right, no injuries. Did the Stealth beat the Renegades?
No,
No. Did the Stealth beat the Watchmen 9 times out of 10?
9 times out of 10. I'll say maybe 8. They may get if you're playing a 10-game series, they may get
The
2.
Watchmen
Uh,
win 8 or the Stealth?
The Stealth win 2. The Watchmen win 8. That's why I said I'll
Right.
give the
And
Stealth
to
2
be
games.
fair, as tough of a matchup as the East Orange Renegades would be to a Vegas team, because it's hard to even imagine, playing against a defensive line like that, play in, play out, when no disrespect, the only defensive line that I've seen that's even close to that is the Insomniacs. Um, and we saw how it went with for all of those teams in those situations. The Watchmen beat the Renegades, though. You know what I'm saying? So the Watchmen, we
Yeah.
we we kind of lose perspective on the
In
Watchmen
o-
because their
in
playoff their
overtime
playoff
though.
game
In
against
overtime, mind you.
yeah,
In
and their
overtime.
playoff game, the Watchmen's playoff game against the Patterson U was not watched. And then
Yes.
they had the other playoff game in which I think it was against the Animals that they pretty much could have won that game easily if they figured out a way to punch it in at the end. But then they went Seattle Seahawks on us, and they didn't give the ball to my boy Dirty, and they left that Animals game out. So that Watchman team, better than the Renegades in my opinion, maybe even
But
better than the Animals. And what I'm saying is that no disrespect to the Stealth, because they can get there, but they're not on the same level as the top teams. I would
but
argue the Stealth kind of get into that range of Heathens, Hawks, and QC Crush, which great. But if the third best team out of 5 in Vegas is as good as the Hawks, the Sickwood and the Insomniacs really only have each other to play and get better. And for me, what I want to see in the 2026 season is for there to be a return to form from some of these other divisions, because the Northeast is deeper than it's been in the last 5 years, just past season. I mean, all those teams we just mentioned, I forgot to mention the U, and the U 100% healthy, I think beats even up to sick with it most of the time. So for me, what I want to see is for next year, I want to hear what your take is on the Patterson U, and what you hypothetically see being that spiritual successor to who the Force had been, which is, look, not the champs by any means, except for the division champs in year one. But the Force were a team that when top teams played, it was not an easy out. And I think that's
it was
important.
not.
I think that's important to have, and not having that, Sick and the Insomniacs really suffered because of it. What say you about next year's outlook for hypothetical the U? Is it ready? Is it time? Or who do you think, or what do you think could be that spiritual successor to the Force out there in the desert?
Well, maybe if the successor is not in Vegas, it possibly could be in California. because there's rumbles about California will throw their hat back into the A7FL realm. If that's true, maybe they could be that team. I don't know. As far as the U, I mean, heck, if Huff decides to give it one more go around and he is 100%, there is always a chance when he is maining your backfield at quarterback. You can never count out the U. I mean, like I said, this was one of their most down years ever. But knowing them and them being a pillar of this league as they have been for many, many years, um, you would expect them to be back close to their form and getting back to playing Patterson U type football. Certainly will definitely not count them out. Um, because I mean, obviously they want to prove that they can still belong in the upper echelon in the league. And certainly, like I said, with the names that they have and the talent that they have, I don't expect back-to-back down years from the Patterson U in 2026. I just don't. And if I do see it, I will really, really be shocked because it's just it's weird to say struggling and mention the words Patterson U. It just really is, from my take.
Well, and the last time, and it was Rob, by the way, it wasn't me, but the last time the A7FL media was saying that, yeah, this is it for the U. They came back and without Huff, they they won the New Jersey division and had a close game against the Watchmen to decide the Northeast. That was that year that the Watchmen had lost to the Nightcrawlers, and it was pretty much the furthest down year for the New Jersey division maybe ever in the history of the A7FL. Right, there was no New Jersey team even in uh, the championship, and there was only one Jersey team in the Final Four. Now, the only time that has happened in the A7FL era was in 2018 when the championship was Baltimore. Baltimore. It was the Gators, the Vikings. Shout outs to Ace Boogie on his championship then. But you go from down year. It wasn't a down year for the U because they beat BIC, and sometimes for a long time those teams could say, yeah, you beat BIC. That's how your season went in the playoffs. And they'd be like, oh, we sent BIC home? Okay, we'll take that. That's a good season. Um, especially for that year not to have Huff and for them to do that. Now they get Huff back, and it was supposed to be this kind of reunion, and everything was going to be great and rosy, and it is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Animals found David Tender. Patterson U still one of the top teams, but Huff's health is in question. Um, I think it is close to us kind of determining either for the Patterson U what is the Patterson U turning the page look like? Because last year they did get some interesting play at the quarterback position from Prince Reem Williams, who is a semi-pro champion. I think he was still getting used to the A7FL style, but he wasn't incapable. I mean, he was one of those runaround guys, right? I didn't see him throwing the ball on time and great all the time, but obviously there is an adjustment to playing the sport. But I think the Patterson U for next year, Dub. The question for me is it time for them to turn the page and really turn the keys over to a bunch of fresh new faces? By the way, that's what BIC had to do for them to win their second championship. They won the first, a lot less than the U had, and they had to turn over by getting rid of guys that all went to the U, by the way, and won. um, Shout outs to Big Robin, Pat Coburn, and company, Big Mo and them. Uh, but that'll be interesting. And then to just finalize this show, Dub, and I'll let you get ready to go back into work or get there for the first time today. Listen, I would love more than anything for the Force to just pretend like nothing happened and come back. But as far as I know, it's not happening. So what I think should happen is the stealth call my guy and they say, Mr. Fox, Corey Hammond's still talking shit, bro. You trying to figure this shit out or what? And look, if it's my fault, then good. It'll be good for the division because I think the biggest crime of the A7FL season last year, it was criminal to see the development of Dion Fox completely and totally basically canceled like a good Netflix show looking for a second season, right? We canceled the development of Dion Fox midway through a cliffhanger, right? We all were ready doing this show 4 weeks before the season started, talking about to Coach Mack about how good the Force could possibly be. And then they pull the rug out from under us, and we're like, yo, what the heck? Give me back all that talent you just stole from our league, you jerks. But I do wish them luck, all those individuals and all the guys involved with that. But I do want to see what the stealth could be, adding a little bit more of a consistency at the quarterback position, specifically passing the ball, Dion Fox, not just running around. We know you can do that. But if you could pass the ball like Sterry does, and then when necessary, go to that second option, that sidearm, which is you running the ball well, that's the type of difference maker that can take one of these teams that are kind of middling and average, and you add that to it, and all of a sudden you're talking about a contender almost immediately. I don't know if Dion Fox is that kind of guy, but I want to be either proven right or wrong, and that's kind of what I'm looking at next year.
Well, interesting takes on this freestyle edition on episode number 157 of this How the Ball. Hopefully, episode 158, we will have our other panelists returning from his assignment, and then we can really dive into numbers 50 through 41. Again, appreciate you guys chiming in. Thank you to Mizzle for chiming in and commenting. I hope you guys enjoyed today's little freestyles. We talk about things that possibly could happen in 2026, what we'd like to see happen in 2026, which again, season 12 of the American Sevens Football League starts March 15th of 2026. So again, get your popcorn ready, mark it in your calendars, mark it in your phone. We throw it off again on the 15th of March of 2026 for season 12. For one, Corey Hammond, being all tricks of the trade, husband, father, coach, and analyst. I'm Double A Anthony Alvarez. For our colleague Chris Vera, who is on assignment, we appreciate y'all for chiming in with us, and we will see you next week for episode 158 of the A7FL's Other Side of the Ball. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Take care of yourself and each other, and enjoy the World Series between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays. I have Jason 6. Go Jays, but that's here nor there.
I
But
mean, if you
enjoy the
want
rest.
to fall asleep while watching a sporting event, turn on the World Series. I'm sure you will.
For Corey, I'm Dub. We'll catch you next week on the other side of the ball. Take care.